the recording going. All right, so today we will be finishing up on Metropolitics. So last time we finished up talking about the various arguments against sprawl, so that kind of group of sort of circles around a city of suburbs as they kind of go farther and farther. So today we're going to start by talking about those who would be for sprawl. Now, having said that, you're not really going to find anyone who says, well, yes, sprawl, I'm a big fan. Yes, we do want that. But it's more that they question whether sprawl is what its opponents claim it to be. And just like how for the people against sprawl, they have four big reasons, so too those who are more for this kind of spread have four general reasons as well: affordability, flexibility, freedom, as well as the aesthetic. So looking at each of these, well, the first one is just pure affordability, that especially when you get outside a city, things tend to be cheaper. And this is, so we already mentioned sort of the issue about taxes, but also the type of cost of living in cities tends to be substantially higher than it would be in suburbs or in many rural areas. So for instance, well, again, something I kind of mentioned briefly, as memory serves, in last class, inside just the sort of room I'm in right now, if you're in some place like New York City or Chicago or something like that, this is the kind of place where you would be paying something like maybe $1,800 worth of rent each month for just basically this one room sort of studio apartment. Versus say if you live outside in the suburbs or something like that, where you get a mortgage on a house, where you may be paying something like say $600 a month for a full house, 2 or 3 bedrooms, kitchen, bath, all these sorts of things. That is just cheaper to oftentimes live farther out. And therefore, for those who want to actually, and in particular, also if you're wanting to have something you can kind of invest in. So for most Americans, the biggest investment they're ever going to make is inside a house. Not only is where you live, but it's also kind of the major type of investment that you have. You can't really do that in a city unless you're very, very rich. Now, they also tend to note, and this is, so we kind of mentioned last time that those who are against sprawl tend to also be focused on city planning. One of the things they mention is that oftentimes the various things put forward by earlier planners are the things that have made making livable cities and livable areas so difficult to manage. So because of the regulations on new buildings, the regulations regarding, say, how much rent can be paid, things of that type, oftentimes these regulations make things exceptionally more expensive inside cities. And additionally, say some of the previous livable areas in cities, even if they were say more lower income and things like that, tended to get destroyed by some of the earlier city planners. So we mentioned in the first section dealing with federalism on centralized federalism, the Great Society. Part of the Great Society was the idea of urban replanning, where a lot of poor neighborhoods were basically demolished and replaced by public projects. So large apartment complexes that were rationally planned to be much better and more efficient spaces. And in the end, ended up becoming criminal hellholes, in effect. That it basically created the kind of anomie that we talked about previously, just kind of ramped that up substantially and tended to make these places substantially worse than they were before. So for those who are against the interpretations of sprawl that came up earlier, they're saying, well, your ideas of a livable city, oftentimes they may make it very livable for the very, very rich, but outside of that, it tends to not make it great for anybody else. That there's a kind of tendency for planners, in this view anyway, the tend to view planners as kind of taking I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase before, but there's a phrase that's sometimes used that to make an omelet, you have to break some eggs, which is usually meant in kind of a negative sense of, oh, okay, well, if we're going to do something good, we've got to harm people. Oftentimes this view is that, okay, for city planners, when they have this beautiful idea of a rational, efficient city, they're effectively treating populations, especially poorer middle class populations, as the eggs that are getting broken, whether they intend to or not. The second thing is flexibility, and this touches on cars. So again, for those who are against sprawl, cars tended to be one of the big problems. For those who are saying this is incorrect, they say that one of the big things about cars is it gives greater flexibility, that you're not being dependent upon train schedules, taxi schedules, buses, things of that type, that you can go as you see fit. And this allows for a greater deal of scheduling. So if I say, if I'm trying to work at a job while also trying to make sure my kids can get to school or to extracurricular activities, and also trying to get involved with other sort of community activities, this is a lot easier to do if I have a car rather than trying to rely on various schedules that are based on whatever, say, a city planner would think is the most rational system. Which then touches on the third, the idea of freedom. But the idea is that many people leave the cities because they want to actually have more freedom as well as more input. So for instance, if you're living in a city, chances are, again, because of the sheer density of population that's there, your voice, unless you have certain levels of influence or money, is probably pretty minor, everything considered. Additionally, again, kind of getting to that idea of anomie, it's harder to form, say, like private associations or groups with other individuals because cities can tend to be so transitory and in terms of people living there. So if you want more input in your community and you want to have more of a form of community, the idea is suburbs give you more of a freedom to do that. The sprawl does that. And in this sense, it's kind of turning on its head, or kind of turning against the idea of planning as being more efficient and useful. This view is saying that we're dealing with kind of organic growth of communities, which is good. You want that sort of thing. That's especially with people trying to artificially create a community that people will feel solidarity with is not terribly simple in many ways. And then finally, there's the aesthetic. And that again gets to that sort of American idea, dream ideal of having a single family home inside a quiet community where you can raise your families. This is something that generally you're not going to get inside a city. And for many of them, they'd use that description used about sprawl in the previous slide to describe the city life itself. So kind of going back to this, yeah, the internal combustion engine, the focus on cars, yeah, that's more of a suburban thing. But the idea of a gas-wasting, fume-choked mess of desolation and so on and so forth, they'd say this is what describes the cities. Cities tend to be blocky, dreary, gray, concrete jungles that they're almost inhuman to live in many ways. That it doesn't feel like someplace where you're in a community. You almost feel like just sort of an economic unit that's kind of been placed inside your own little pod or cell, in a sense. That this is effectively an ugly sort of way of living. And it's, in this view, this is one of the reasons why cities have so many problems with poverty and crime, is that typically cities just don't look like places you want to live. They just seem anonymous and hollow in many ways, just sort of dirty. Again, getting to this aesthetic view in terms of culture wars that tend to become a big difference between, say, some of the views of American politics. One other issue that comes up, and this is what we'll finish up on, is the idea of consolidation or fragmentation. So this especially comes up again with something like sprawl. So again, like the greater Houston area, the city of Houston itself, the municipal corporation is just sort of a core there. Meanwhile, in the area that's sort of spread out as the greater Houston area, it's suburbs. Many of these have broken into their own sort of municipalities. So Sugarland, Cumberland, things of that type. So, and then also say dealing with the counties that would be involved there. So the question is, would it be better to consolidate these or let them still stay fragmented? So in the consolidated view, so basically trying to combine these sort of governments together in some sense, maybe an overarching government. So an example of something like this would be in the Midwest. For Marion County and the city of Indianapolis, something called the Unigov system, where effectively the county government and the city government have been merged and become one, in fact. That would be an example of consolidation. So the benefits for this, the idea is this helps with public services. So there's more consistency, there's more rationality to it. You're not having to worry about some of those jurisdiction problems that arise. Additionally, this helps with coordination. So you're not having to worry about, say, how you're trying to make sure that, say, for certain types of services, people are getting them without having to worry, is this a county concern, is this a city concern, which city's concern is it? In effect, everyone will still be covered, is the idea. Which also touches on equality, because then the idea is that everyone is equally being treated well. So the idea being that, again, if people are going out into the suburbs, oftentimes those are the ones who can afford it, so that those inside the city cores tend to be the ones who are left out. The idea with consolidation is that everyone is still covered, and additionally that the funds from things like taxes and so forth are also more spread. Then finally, also to responsibility, getting to this idea as well, that to try and ensure that those people are kind of benefiting from working in the city but living outside of it, this ensures that they still have responsibilities to the city that they are benefiting from, in effect. But then there are views of fragmentation being better. One is identity. So saying that, okay, well, especially if we're talking about, say, places that have multiple municipalities, people kind of identify with that particular one. They don't want to just be absorbed into something else. If someone's from Sugarland, yeah, they work in Houston, but they don't view themselves necessarily as a Houstonite, nor do they want to. Second is access. And if things are more fragmented, the benefit is that it's dealing with smaller populations in smaller areas, which means you have a better chance of actually accessing it. So for instance, if I'm in Cumberland, again, that's sort of municipality, and there's some problem with, say, the water utilities, smaller population. So when I'm calling for water utilities, is a population of, say, maybe 60,000 people. There's a better chance they're actually going to contact me. If Cumberland is consolidated under Houston and it's all just one big Houston sort of thing, then I'm just one customer out of approximately 4 or 5 million. My access is probably going to be much more limited, which then touches on effectiveness. The idea is that if you have more sort of smaller sorts of governing agencies, this tends to make them more effective because they're not trying to deal with such a large population. It also allows you to have greater influence because, again, smaller population, and then also with schools that people can pick and choose a little bit more what they wish. Wow, I didn't realize we had so little left in Metropolitics. Well, before continuing, any questions? Comments, concerns over anything dealing with Metropolitics yesterday or today, or Sunday and today? Okay, well, that being the case, we will probably deal with political parties on Thursday, and I have not sent out the files to you for political parties yet. Right, so that being the case, I guess that makes the lecture rather short today. My apologies for that. So that being the case, again, many of you have already sent the extra credit. Thank you for that. Short of the process. There's some that come in yesterday and this morning that I have not gotten to. We'll be getting to those today as well. Otherwise, on Thursday, we will start up on political parties in the states, as well as the cities and counties and so forth. And we'll have that together then. Also, again, with the recording, hopefully we'll have that available on Canvas soon. If Canvas does not work for it, then we will just put it up on YouTube and I will send the links to you from there. Any final questions, comments, thoughts, anything at that time? All right, well, with that being the case,